The blood on her hands was not her own, and Lucian Zimmerman knew that the moment he saw the orc woman stagger into the clearing behind his farmhouse. She moved like a ship listing in a storm, each step threatening to be her last, and clutched against her chest was something that made his breath catch his youngest son's wooden horse, the one Thomas had been playing with near the forest edge that morning. Lucian had been drawing water from the well when he heard her footsteps, heavy and uneven, and when he turned, she was already falling, her massive frame collapsing against his kitchen door with a sound that shook the frame. He dropped the bucket and ran, his mind cataloging details even as panic surged through him. She was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with green skin that seemed to have lost some of its luster, gone pale beneath the blood that streaked her arms and torso. Deep gashes ran along her shoulders and one thigh, the kind of wounds that spoke of claws and teeth. Her leather armor was torn in several places, and her black hair, pulled back in a warrior's braid, had come partially loose. But it was her face that stopped him, not monstrous, not savage, but exhausted and relieved, her small tusks visible as her lips parted in shallow breaths. "The boys," Lucian gasped, reaching her but not quite touching, his hands hovering uselessly. "Where are my boys?" Her eyes opened, amber and bright despite her condition. "Safe," she managed, her voice rough but clear. "Sent them. Running home, 3 wolves, dead now." Her hand loosened on the wooden horse, letting it fall. "Your sons are safe." Lucian's heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst. He spun toward the house, wrenching open the door. "Thomas, Marcus, are you here?" "Papa." The cry came from inside, and then both boys were tumbling into view. Thomas, barely 6 years old, and Marcus at 9, both tear-stained and terrified but whole. They crashed into him, and he caught them, pulling them close, his hands running over their heads and shoulders to confirm what his eyes told him. "We're sorry, Papa," Marcus sobbed. "We went too far into the woods, and the wolves came, and she just appeared and fought them, and she told us to run, and we ran, but Papa, she saved us. She saved us." "Hush now, hush," Lucian murmured. But his eyes were on the orc woman who had slumped fully to the ground now, her back against the door frame, her breathing labored. His sons were alive because of her. This orc, this stranger, had put herself between his children and death. He had decisions to make, and he had to make them fast. "Marcus, take your brother inside. Get clean cloths from the cupboard, all of them. Thomas, pump fresh water into the big basin. Move now." His voice had the snap of command that he had not used since his army days, and both boys responded instantly, scrambling to obey. Lucian knelt beside the orc woman. Up close, the extent of her injuries was worse than he had thought. The gashes were deep, still bleeding sluggishly, and her leather vest was soaked through in places. "Can you stand if I help you?" "Should not." "Impose," she said, but even as she spoke, her body betrayed her, listing sideways. He caught her, surprised by the solid weight of her, the warmth of her skin through the blood and leather. "You saved my sons. You collapsed at my door. You are coming inside, and I am going to tend those wounds, and we can discuss propriety after you are not bleeding to death on my doorstep." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or gratitude, but she nodded once. Together, they got her upright, though she leaned heavily on him, and he half carried her through the door into his kitchen. The boys had cleared the sturdy wooden table, and he helped her onto it, her legs hanging off one end. "Marcus, bring the medicine box from my room. Thomas, that water, good boy, bring it here." Lucian's hands were already moving, assessing. He had field experience from his years in the border wars, had stitched up more wounded soldiers than he cared to remember. But he had never treated an orc. He did not know if their bodies worked the same way. "I heal quickly," she said, as if reading his thoughts. Her voice was steadier now that she was lying down. "But the wounds need cleaning. Wolves here carry sickness sometimes." "I know," Lucian said grimly. 6 years living on the frontier had taught him that much. He had lost a neighbor to wolf bite fever 2 winters ago. He rolled up his sleeves and plunged his hands into the basin Thomas had brought, scrubbing quickly. "This is going to hurt." "Pain is familiar," she replied, and there was something in her tone that made him look at her more carefully. She was young. He realized probably not much older than his own 28 years, but her eyes held the kind of weariness that came from hard living. He worked in silence for a while, cleaning the wounds with water, and then whiskey that made even her stoic expression tighten. The boys hovered nearby, watching with wide eyes. The gashes were deep but clean, the kind of injuries that would scar but not kill if infection was prevented. He stitched where necessary, his fingers remembering the motions even after years away from battlefield surgery. "What is your name?" Marcus asked suddenly, his voice small in the quiet kitchen. The orc woman's eyes shifted to him. "Garla. I am Marcus. That is Thomas. This is our papa, Lucian." The boy's politeness would have made Lucian smile under other circumstances. His late wife had drilled good manners into both their sons before the fever took her 2 years ago. "Garla," Thomas echoed, moving closer. "You killed 3 wolves." "Thomas," Lucian began, but Garla spoke over him. "Yes. They were hunting you. One I broke his neck, one I stabbed, one I strangled after he tore my leg." She said it matter-of-factly without boasting, and Lucian saw Marcus's eyes go wide. "Why?" the older boy asked. "Everyone says orcs hate humans." "Marcus, enough," Lucian said sharply, but again Garla answered. "Many do. I heard children screaming. Children should not die to wolves, no matter their skin." She paused, wincing as Lucian tied off a stitch. "I was not always alone. I had a brother younger. He died to wolves when I was 14. No one came to help us." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Lucian's work. He felt something twist in his chest, grief recognizing grief. He finished the last bandage and stepped back, washing his hands again. "You need rest and food. The bleeding has stopped, but you have lost blood and fought hard. Marcus, there is stew from last night. Warm it up. Thomas, get a blanket from the chest." "I should go," Garla said, but she made no move to rise. "Your neighbors, if they see an orc." "Let me worry about my neighbors," Lucian said firmly. "You are staying until those wounds close properly, at least a few days. We have a small room off the barn. It was meant for a farmhand, but I have been working alone. It has a bed and a stove. You will stay there." She looked at him for a long moment, those amber eyes searching his face. "You are not afraid of me." It was not quite a question, but he answered anyway. "I have fought beside good men and against evil ones. I have seen humans who were monsters and met enough of your kind during the border wars to know that honor and cruelty are not divided by race." He met her gaze steadily. "You saved my sons. You are welcome here." Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the stoic mask. For a moment, she looked much younger, almost vulnerable. Then she nodded once, accepting. The next few days established a rhythm that felt both strange and somehow natural. Garla stayed in the small farmhand quarters, which Lucian had cleaned out and furnished as best he could. She slept most of the first day, her body recovering from blood loss and exhaustion. When she was awake, she accepted food but spoke little, still wary despite his assurances. The boys, however, had no such reservations. Children possessed a remarkable ability to adapt, and having been saved by Garla, they regarded her with something approaching hero worship. Thomas especially would slip out to her room whenever he could, chattering about his day, asking questions about orcs and wolves and fighting. Garla tolerated this with surprising patience. answering in her direct, unadorned way. Lucian watched these interactions from a distance, fascinated despite himself. His wife had been gone 2 years, and in that time, the farm had become a place of quiet routine work and meals and bedtime, the same patterns day after day. Garla's presence disrupted that, brought something electric and alive into their space. On the third day, he found her outside her room, testing her injured leg. The wounds were closing remarkably fast, just as she had said they would, the flesh knitting together at a pace that would have taken a human 2 weeks. "You should still rest it," he called, approaching with a basket of eggs he had just collected. "I have rested enough. I am not accustomed to idleness." She took a few more careful steps, and he could see the stiffness in her movement, the way she favored the leg just slightly. "You work this farm alone, since my wife died, yes. The boys help where they can, but they are young yet." He shifted the basket. "I manage. It is a lot of land for one man." She looked around the property with an assessing eye. "Your fence line needs repair. The northern pasture has weak spots, and your woodpile is too small for the coming winter." He bristled slightly at the observations, even though they were accurate. "I am aware. I do what I can when I can. I could help, while I heal, payment for the care you have given me." She said it casually, but he caught the undertone. She did not like being in debt, did not like being helpless. "You do not owe me anything. I owe you food, shelter, and medical treatment. I am not a beggar." There was pride in her voice, stiff and unbending. "Let me work." Lucian considered her for a moment. He could use the help if he was honest. The farm had been slowly wearing him down, the endless tasks piling up faster than he could complete them. But having an orc working his land would cause talk, and talk could turn dangerous for both of them. Still, looking at her face, at the determination and the need to be useful written there, he found himself nodding. "Light work only. Your wounds are not fully healed, and if any neighbors come by, you go back to your room." "Agreed, agreed." So Garla began working the farm, and Lucian discovered that she had not exaggerated her capabilities. Despite her injuries, she moved through tasks with an efficiency that spoke of experience. She repaired fence posts with hands that knew tools, stacked wood with a system that maximized space, and even helped in the garden, her touch surprisingly gentle with the plants. They worked side by side more often than not, and in the working, they began to talk. Small things at first, observations about the weather, questions about crops, stories about the boys. But gradually, the conversations deepened. "How did you come to be alone out here?" Lucian asked one afternoon as they reinforced the pasture fence together. Garla was quiet for a moment, hammering a post into place with steady strikes. "I left my clan 6 months ago. There was a raid being planned against a human settlement. I spoke against it, said that the families there had done nothing to us, that attacking them would only bring more violence down on our heads. The clan elders cast me out for cowardice and human sympathy." She said the last words with bitter mockery. "I have been wandering since. That must be hard. Being alone. Better alone than participating in slaughter." She moved to the next post. "What about you? How did you end up on the frontier with 2 young sons?" "My wife and I came here 5 years ago seeking new opportunities. We wanted land of our own, space for our boys to grow. It was hard but good. Then the fever came through 2 winters ago. Sarah fought it for 8 days, but in the end." He trailed off, swallowing hard. Even after 2 years, the loss was a physical ache. "I am sorry," Garla said quietly. "To lose a mate is a terrible thing." "Yes." He cleared his throat. "But the boys needed me to keep going, so I did. Some days that is all you can do, just keep going." "Yes," she echoed, and he understood that she knew exactly what he meant. The days continued, turning into a week and then 2. Garla's wounds healed to pale scars, her strength returning fully. She should have left, probably. They both knew it. But she stayed, and Lucian did not ask her to go, and the farm began to show the difference two sets of adult hands made. The boys flourished under the attention. Marcus, who had been taking on too much responsibility for his age, relaxed back into childhood, playing and laughing more freely. Thomas, who had been too quiet since his mother's death, chattered constantly, splitting his attention between his father and Garla with the easy acceptance of the very young. It was Thomas who first said what they were all beginning to feel. "I wish Garla could stay forever," he announced one evening at supper. They had started eating together in the main house, the four of them around the kitchen table, and the domestic normalcy of it had begun to feel right in a way that Lucian had not expected. "Thomas," Lucian began, unsure what to say. "I am only staying until I have repaid my debt," Garla said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You have more than repaid anything you might have owed," Lucian pointed out. "The farm has not looked this good in 2 years. If you stay now, it is because you want to, not because you must." She looked at him across the table, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of truth. She did want to stay, and he wanted her to. When had that happened? When had this strange, stern orc woman become essential to his daily life? "People will talk," she said quietly. "Let them talk. It could be dangerous. For you, for the boys, we will manage." Marcus was watching them both with an intensity that seemed too old for his 9 years. "Are you going to stay, Garla?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands flat on the table. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Yes, if your father truly does not mind, I will stay." Thomas cheered, and Marcus grinned, and Lucian felt something warm and bright unfold in his chest, something he had not felt since Sarah died. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of something like happiness. But the frontier was not a place that allowed happiness to exist uncontested for long. The trouble came on a cold morning in early autumn. Lucian was in the barn with Garla, showing her how he wanted the winter hay arranged, when they heard horses approaching. Multiple horses, moving fast. They exchanged a glance, and Garla immediately moved toward the back of the barn, intending to slip away as they had agreed she would if visitors came. But it was too late. The riders were already there, 6 men on horseback surrounding the barn entrance. Lucian recognized them, all neighbors from farms within a few miles, men he knew casually, but not well. And at their head was Silas Green, a hard man who had made his dislike of orcs well known ever since he had lost a brother in the border wars. "Lucian Zimmerman," Silas called, his voice carrying the weight of accusation. "We need to talk." Lucian stepped out of the barn, moving to put himself between the riders and Garla, who had frozen in the shadows. "Silas, what brings you by? Do not play stupid. We have all seen her, the orc you have living on your property, working your land, eating at your table with your boys." Silas's face was flushed with anger or whiskey or both. "What in God's name are you thinking, man?" "I am thinking that Garla saved my sons from wolf attack and nearly died doing it, and I will not turn her out for the crime of being kind," Lucian said evenly, fighting to keep his voice calm. "Anger would only escalate this." "She is an orc," another man said, as if that explained everything. "They are savages, killers. You are keeping a monster in your home with your children." "She is no monster. She has been nothing but helpful and honorable. She has addled your brain is what she has done," Silas interrupted. "This is unnatural, Zimmerman. Wrong. And we cannot have it, not this close to our own families. You need to send her away now, or we will remove her ourselves." Lucian felt a surge of cold fury. "You will do no such thing. This is my land, my family. You have no say in who I shelter." We have every say when you are harboring a threat to the community." Silas gestured, and two of the men dismounted, pulling rifles from their saddles. Everything happened very fast after that. Garla stepped out of the barn, moving to stand beside Lucian despite his hissed warning. Her hands were empty, held out to show she was unarmed, but her presence shifted the whole dynamic. The men with rifles raised them, not quite pointing but ready. "I will go," Garla said quietly. "There is no need for violence." "No," Lucian said flatly. "You are not going anywhere." "Lucian, no. You saved my sons. You have worked beside me for weeks, helped me keep this farm running. You are not leaving because these men are afraid of what they do not understand." He looked at Silas, at the other men. "She has done nothing wrong. She has threatened no one. If you have a problem with her presence, you have a problem with me." "You cannot stand against all of us," Silas said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Maybe not. But I was a soldier for 8 years before I became a farmer. I am not some easy target, Silas, and if you want her gone, you will have to go through me." Lucian's hand moved to his belt where he kept a knife. It was a small gesture, but the threat was clear. The standoff stretched, tension thick enough to choke on. Then a new voice cut through it. "Papa." Marcus stood in the doorway of the house, Thomas peering from behind him. Both boys looked terrified, and Lucian's heart sank. He had not wanted them to see this, to be part of this ugliness. "Marcus, take your brother inside. Is Garla leaving?" Thomas's voice was small, wavering. "You cannot make her leave. She is our friend." "She is an orc, boy," one of the men said, not unkindly. "She does not belong here." "She belongs more than you do," Marcus shot back with a child's fierce logic. "She saved us. She takes care of us. What have you done?" Out of the mouths of children, Lucian thought, something fierce and proud swelling in his chest. His sons, standing up for what was right even when it was dangerous. Sarah would have been proud. Silas looked at the boys, at Lucian, at Garla standing tall and silent. Something in his face shifted, not acceptance, but perhaps the recognition that this was not a fight he could win without making enemies of a neighbor and traumatizing 2 children. "This is not over, Zimmerman. The community will not accept this." "Then the community can take it up with me directly, not through threats and rifles." Lucian kept his voice hard. "Now get off my land." For a moment he thought Silas would push it, would force the confrontation to violence. But then the older man spat into the dirt and wheeled his horse around. "You are a fool, Zimmerman. This will end badly for you." The men mounted up and rode off, and Lucian did not relax until they were out of sight. Then his knees went weak, and he sat down hard on the barn step, adrenaline draining out of him in a rush. Garla knelt beside him, her hand hovering near his shoulder but not quite touching. "You should not have done that. You have made enemies today." "I made a choice," he corrected. "The right choice. For me, I am not worth, you are worth it," he interrupted, looking up at her. "You saved my sons. You have become part of this family, whether either of us intended it or not. I am not going to throw you away because narrow-minded fools cannot see past your skin." She stared at him, and he watched emotions flicker across her face: gratitude, disbelief, something that might have been affection. "I do not understand you, Lucian Zimmerman." "That makes 2 of us," he admitted, and despite everything, he found himself smiling. The boys came running then, crashing into both of them, and they all ended up in a tangle of relief and reassurance. Thomas was crying, and Marcus was pretending he was not, and Garla awkwardly patted their heads, and Lucian held them all together as best he could. Later, after the boys had finally been settled and sent to their room, Lucian and Garla sat on the porch in the gathering darkness. The night was cool, autumn promising the winter to come, and the stars were beginning to emerge overhead. "They will come back," Garla said quietly. "Perhaps not Silas, but someone, Word will spread. This will not be allowed to stand. I know. Lucian did not shy away from the truth. We will face it when it comes, together. Together, she echoed, and the word sounded strange in her mouth as if she was not accustomed to it. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets and wind and the distant call of an owl. Lucian found his awareness narrowing to the woman beside him, to the solid presence of her, the quiet strength. When had she stopped being the orc woman who collapsed at his door and become simply Garla, essential and valued? What was your wife like? Garla asked suddenly. The question surprised him, but he considered it carefully. Sarah was kind, patient with the boys, good with the garden. She laughed easily, loved fiercely. We were happy. He paused. But she has been gone 2 years now, and I have been so focused on just surviving that I forgot what it was to live. You reminded me. I reminded you. She sounded skeptical. You and the boys are happier than I have seen them since Sarah died. The farm is thriving. I find myself looking forward to each day instead of just enduring it. He turned to look at her profile in the starlight. You brought life back to this place, Garla. To me. She was silent for a long time, and when she spoke, her voice was rough. I have never had this. A home, people who wanted me there. Even in my clan, I was always too soft, too questioning. I thought I was cursed to wander alone. You are not alone anymore, not unless you choose to be. Your people will never accept me. My people are in that house, asleep, he said firmly. The boys and you, everyone else can go hang. She laughed, a sound he had rarely heard from her, low and genuine. You are either very brave or very foolish. I have been called both in my time. He hesitated, then took a risk. Garla, I want you to know that you have a place here for as long as you want it, not as a debt or an obligation. As family. She turned to look at him fully, and in the dim light her eyes were bright. Family, family, he confirmed. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, and Lucian felt something shift between them, some acknowledgement of feeling that went beyond gratitude or friendship. But neither of them named it, not yet. It was too new, too fragile. I should sleep, Garla said eventually, rising. Tomorrow will bring what it brings. Tomorrow will bring what it brings, Lucian agreed. She left, walking back to her small room, and Lucian stayed on the porch for a while longer, thinking about choices and consequences and the strange paths life took. He had not expected any of this when he woke up weeks ago to find an orc woman bleeding on his doorstep. But he would not trade it, would not change the way his small family had grown to include her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The next few weeks were tense. Silas and his group did not return, but the damage was done. When Lucian took the wagon into the small town 5 miles away to trade eggs and vegetables, he felt the cold shoulders, the hostile stares. The general store owner served him, but without the usual pleasantries. The blacksmith refused his business outright. Lucian bore it stoically, knowing that his defiance had cost him standing in the community. But he also noticed something else: a few people who offered quiet nods of support. The widow Morrison, who stopped him in the street to say that she thought what he was doing was right, that kindness should be repaid with kindness. The young couple who had just settled their own farm and admitted they had been helped by an orc trader once and never forgotten it. The frontier bred a certain pragmatism, and while many would condemn him, some understood that survival often meant looking past old prejudices. Still, the isolation was real. Marcus and Thomas felt it, 2 friends whose parents no longer allowed them to visit, invitations to community events that stopped coming. It hurt the boys, and that hurt Lucian worse than any snub directed at him. Garla noticed, of course. She noticed everything, and he could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she drew back slightly, as if making herself smaller would somehow help. One evening, After a particularly hard day where Marcus had come home in tears because his best friend said he could not play with him anymore, Lucian found Garla packing a small bag in her room. "What are you doing?" he asked from the doorway, though he knew, leaving. "This has gone on long enough. Your sons are suffering because of me. My sons are suffering because other people are cruel and stupid, not because of you." He stepped into the room. "Do not do this, Garla. I cannot stay and watch them hurt." Her voice was fierce, pained. "Marcus cried tonight. Thomas has nightmares. This is my fault." "This is not your fault. You did not create the prejudice. You are just the target of it." He moved closer and impulsively reached out to still her hands where they were folding a shirt. "Please, do not go. We need you." "You would be better off. We would not. Garla, you have become part of us. The boys love you." He stopped, realizing what he had almost said, the words that had been growing in his heart for weeks now. "I need you here." She looked at him, her amber eyes searching his face. "Lucian, what are you saying?" He took a breath, committing. "I am saying that somewhere between you collapsing at my door and now, you became essential to me. Not just for the help with the farm or the way you care for the boys, but you. I find myself looking for you first thing in the morning. I save up stories to tell you. I am happier when you are near." He paused. "I think I am falling in love with you, Garla, and that terrifies me, but not as much as the thought of you leaving." The silence stretched so long that he thought he had made a terrible mistake, had misread everything. Then Garla moved, closing the distance between them, and her hands came up to frame his face with a gentleness that contradicted her strength. "I did not think I could have this," she whispered. "A home, a family, someone who looked at me and saw more than an orc. You have given me all of that, Lucian. I did not want to admit how much I needed it, how much I need you, because I was afraid it would be taken away. I am not taking it away. I am asking you to stay permanently. I am asking," he paused, knowing he was rushing but unable to stop. "I am asking if you could see a future here. With me, with the boys, a real future." "What kind of future?" Her voice was barely audible. "The kind where you are not a guest or a helper but my partner, in all ways." He swallowed hard. "I know it is fast. I know the world will not make it easy. But I lost Sarah, and I learned that life is too short to not hold tight to the people you love. I love you, Garla. I want you to stay not for weeks or months but for always. I want to marry you if you will have me." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You are insane. Marriage between human and orc is forbidden in most places. Your community already hates me. This will make everything worse. I do not care. Your sons, my sons adore you. Marcus asked me last week if you were going to be his new mother. Thomas calls you his friend, but looks at you like you hung the moon." Lucian's hands came up to cover hers where they rested against his face. "We are already a family in every way that matters. I am just asking to make it official, to give it a name." Garla closed her eyes and he saw a tear slip free, tracking down her green skin. "I never thought anyone would want this with me, want me. I want you, all of you, for the rest of my life." He meant it with an intensity that shook him. "Say yes, Garla. Please say yes." She opened her eyes and they were bright with tears and something that looked like joy. "Yes. Against all wisdom and sense, yes, I will marry you, Lucian Zimmerman." He kissed her then, cupping her face and pressing his lips to hers, and it was strange and wonderful and right. She tasted like the herbs she had been grinding for dinner, and her tusks pressed against his mouth, and her skin was warm beneath his hands. It was nothing like kissing Sarah had been, but it was perfect in its own way, perfect because it was Garla. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she laughed shakily. "What do we do now? Now we tell the boys, and then we figure out how to get married when no church will have us and no official will sign the papers. You have thought about this." "I have thought about little else for days," he admitted. We will make our own vows if we have to, speak them before witnesses we trust, or just between ourselves and whatever gods might be listening. The ceremony does not matter as much as the promise. The promise, she repeated and smiled. I promise to stand beside you, Lucian, through whatever comes. And I promise to stand beside you, he echoed, through whatever comes. They told the boys the next morning over breakfast, and the reaction was everything Lucian could have hoped for. Thomas cheered and asked if that meant Garla was staying forever, and when they confirmed it, he launched himself at her in a hug that nearly knocked her off her chair. Marcus was more reserved but no less pleased, his smile wide as he looked between them. Does this mean we can call you Mother? He asked Garla carefully. She looked stunned, her hand coming up to her chest. If you want to, I would be honored. Mother Garla, Thomas tested, and then nodded decisively. I like it. Something in Garla's expression broke open, wonder and love and disbelief all at once, and Lucian felt his own eyes burn. This, he thought. This was what he had been missing, what they had all been missing, a family complete and whole. But the world outside their small farmhouse was not so kind. When word spread that Lucian intended to marry Garla, and word always spread on the frontier, the backlash was swift and severe. The cold shoulders turned to open hostility. Someone threw a rock through their window one night. They found one of their cows slaughtered in the field, killed for meanness rather than food. Lucian reported it to the local law, but the sheriff was sympathetic to Silas's group and did nothing. They were being pushed, systematically isolated, and Lucian knew it would get worse before it got better. We could leave, Garla suggested one night after they had cleaned up the broken glass from the window. Go further west, start over where no one knows us. We could, Lucian agreed. But I am tired of running from people's hatred. We have done nothing wrong. I will not let them drive us from our home. Stubborn human, she said, but there was affection in it. Stubborn orc, he returned, and she smiled despite everything. The crisis came a week later in the form of fire. Lucian woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of Thomas screaming. He was out of bed and running before his mind fully caught up, bursting into the boys' room to find smoke seeping under the door, thick and black. Outside, he could hear the roar of flames. Get the boys to the root cellar, he shouted to Garla, who appeared at his shoulder. Now, she did not argue, just scooped up Thomas and grabbed Marcus's hand, pulling them toward the cellar entrance in the kitchen. Lucian ran to the front of the house and threw open the door to a nightmare. The barn was fully engulfed, flames leaping into the night sky, and the fire was spreading toward the house, racing along the dry grass. He had minutes, maybe, before the house caught. And in the barn were his plow horse and 3 dairy cows, animals that meant the difference between survival and starvation come winter. Lucian ran toward the barn without thinking, heard Garla screaming his name behind him, but the animals were shrieking in terror, and he could not leave them. The heat was immense as he got close, singeing his skin and hair. The main door was blocked by flames, but there was a side entrance, and he crashed through it into smoke and chaos. The animals were in their stalls, panicked and kicking. He got the horse free first, slapping its rump to send it bolting out the side door, then fought his way to the cows. One was already down, overcome by smoke. The other 2 he managed to free, shoving them toward safety even as the roof groaned ominously overhead. He was stumbling back toward the door when a beam gave way, crashing down in a shower of sparks and burning wood. It missed him by inches, but it blocked the exit, and suddenly he was trapped, fire on 3 sides and smoke so thick he could not see. This is how I die, he thought with strange clarity, and then I am sorry, Garla. I am sorry, boys. But then there was a roar that cut through even the fire's sound, and the burning beam was being lifted, and Garla was there, impossibly strong, holding the massive piece of timber up long enough for him to scramble through. She threw it aside and grabbed him, half carrying him away from the barn as the entire structure collapsed inward with a sound like the world ending. They made it 20 feet before his legs gave out, and they both went down in the dirt, coughing and gasping. Lucian's lungs burned, his skin felt scorched, and everything hurt, but he was alive. They were alive. "You idiot," Garla choked out between coughs. "You absolute fool running into fire animals," he managed. "Could not leave them. Animals can be replaced, you cannot." She was crying, he realized, tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face. "You cannot leave me, do you understand? I just found you. You do not get to die." "Not planning to," he rasped. And then Marcus and Thomas were there, climbing out of the cellar and throwing themselves at both of them, and they all held each other while the barn burned down to embers. The fire had clearly been set. The next morning, examining the remains, Lucian found evidence of accelerant, the pattern of burning that spoke of deliberate arson. Someone had tried to destroy his livelihood, had nearly killed him and his family in the process. He was standing in the ruins, trying to figure out what they would do without the barn, without most of their tools and feed, when riders approached. He tensed, expecting more trouble, but these were different men: the widow Morrison's son, the young couple from down the road, a few others who had offered quiet support. "We heard what happened," Morrison's son said, dismounting. "This is wrong, Zimmerman, dead wrong. We want to help." "I cannot pay for help right now," Lucian admitted, his voice rough from smoke. "We are not asking for pay. We are asking to do what is right." The young man looked around at the others, who nodded. "We are going to help you rebuild. And we are going to make sure the community knows that not everyone agrees with what was done here." Lucian felt something tight in his chest loosen. "I do not know what to say. Say you will accept the help, and say you will stand firm. People like Silas Green, they thrive when good folks stay quiet." Someone pushed back, so they rebuilt. It took 3 weeks of hard labor, but with the help of the small group of neighbors who supported them, a new barn rose from the ashes of the old. It was not as large, not as well appointed, but it was solid and would see them through the winter. During those weeks, something else happened. The tide of opinion began to shift. Not with everyone, not even with most, but enough. The violence of the arson had shaken people, made some realize that hatred taken to its extreme was destructive to everyone. And seeing Lucian and Garla working side by side with their supporters, seeing the boys happy and healthy, made it harder to paint them as some kind of threat. Silas Green was quiet during this time, and Lucian suspected the man knew he had gone too far. Arson was a serious crime, even on the frontier, and if Lucian chose to push for justice, there could be consequences. It was an unspoken truce. Silas left them alone, and Lucian did not pursue charges. Finally, on a crisp autumn day, with the new barn complete and the farm back to working order, Lucian and Garla stood before the small group who had helped them and spoke their vows. There was no official, no church. Just Morrison's widow, who had lived long enough to believe that love was love, serving as their witness. Lucian and Garla stood with Marcus and Thomas between them, all four holding hands, and spoke promises that came from the heart rather than any script. "I promise to stand beside you," Lucian said, looking into Garla's amber eyes. "In good times and hard times, in acceptance and prejudice, in health and sickness. I promise to honor you, to listen to you, to build a life with you. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your love, for as long as we both live." Garla's voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I promise to stand beside you, to care for your sons as my own, to work this land with you, to face whatever comes. I promise to be honest, to be strong, to be gentle when strength is not needed. I promise to love you, Lucian Zimmerman, with everything I am, for as long as I breathe. Then by the power of your own promises and the witness of those who care for you, I name you married, the widow Morrison said, smiling. Kiss your bride, Lucian. He did, and it was sweeter than the first time, weighted with promise and hope. The small group cheered, and Thomas whooped, and Marcus grinned, and for that moment, everything was perfect. The party afterward was small but joyful. Food appeared as if by magic. People had brought dishes, contributed what they could. There was music when someone produced a fiddle, and dancing in the yard of the new barn. Lucian danced with Garla, awkward and laughing, and then with each of his sons, and then with Garla again because he could not stay away from her. As the sun set and people began to drift home, the four of them, Lucian, Garla, Marcus, and Thomas, stood together watching the last light fade from the sky. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we live, Lucian said simply. We work the farm, we take care of each other, we build our life. Together. Will it be hard? Thomas wanted to know. Sometimes, Garla said honestly, but we will face it together, and that makes all the difference. Together, Marcus echoed and slipped his hand into Garla's. On her other side, Thomas did the same, and Lucian put his arm around her shoulders, pulling them all close. The stars were coming out, bright and cold and beautiful. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, but Lucian felt no fear. His family was safe, his home was solid, and the woman he loved stood beside him. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges. There would still be those who condemned them, still be obstacles to face. But they would face it together, this strange, wonderful family they had built from desperation and kindness and love. I love you, he murmured to Garla, just loud enough for her to hear. I love you, she returned, her voice rich with emotion. And in that moment, under the vast frontier sky, with his sons and his wife beside him, Lucian Zimmerman was happier than he had ever thought possible. The orc woman who had collapsed at his door had become his whole world, and he would not trade it for anything. The seasons turned as they always did on the frontier. Winter came with its bitter cold and long nights, but the new barn held against the wind, and the family inside the farmhouse stayed warm and close. They played games by firelight, told stories, and weathered the dark months together. Spring brought planting season, and Garla proved to have an intuitive understanding of the land, knowing where crops would thrive and how to coax the most from the soil. The boys grew like weeds, Marcus shooting up until he was nearly to Lucian's shoulder, Thomas losing the last of his baby softness and becoming a wiry, energetic child. The community remained divided, but the worst of the hostility had passed. Silas Green had moved away, some said driven out by his own conscience. Others claimed he simply saw no future in a place where his actions had turned neighbors against him. Either way, his departure eased the tension considerably. More people began to accept, if not embrace, the unusual family. Lucian's determination and Garla's steady kindness wore down resistance. When she helped deliver the widow Morrison's grandchild during a difficult birth, using orc techniques that saved both mother and baby, gratitude opened doors that prejudice had closed. When she and Lucian brought in the largest harvest the farm had ever produced and shared their surplus with struggling neighbors, generosity built bridges. By the time summer arrived, blazing and bright, they had achieved something like normalcy. The boys had friends again. Though not all their old ones, some parents remained too prejudiced to allow their children near an orc, even one who had proven herself time and again. But there were new friends, children of the families who had helped rebuild the barn, and that was enough. One evening, as Lucian and Garla sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dark, she spoke quietly. "I am pregnant." He turned to her so fast he nearly fell out of his chair. "You are what? Pregnant? With child?" She placed a hand on her still flat stomach, her expression a mix of wonder and uncertainty. "I did not think it was possible, human and orc, but the midwife confirmed it today when I went into town. There are cases of it, apparently, rare but not unheard of." Lucian felt like someone had knocked all the air from his lungs. "We are having a baby. We are having a baby," she confirmed, and then her composure cracked. "I am terrified, Lucian. What if something goes wrong? What if the child is not accepted by either humans or orcs?" What if he silenced her with a kiss, then pulled back to rest his forehead against hers? "We will love this child the way we love each other and the boys completely and without reservation. Yes, it will be hard. Yes, there will be people who will not accept them. But they will have us and Marcus and Thomas, and they will know they are wanted and loved. That is what matters," she exhaled shakily. "When did you become so wise?" "When I met an orc woman who taught me that love matters more than fear," he said softly. "We will be fine, Garla, all of us." And they were. When they told the boys, Marcus asked intelligent questions about whether the baby would look more human or more orc, and Thomas immediately declared he would teach the baby everything he knew. Their acceptance was absolute, their excitement genuine. The pregnancy progressed normally, or as normally as a human orc pregnancy could. Garla experienced morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, cravings for bizarre combinations of food, and an energy that had her working the farm practically, until the day she went into labor. That day came in early spring, a full year after Garla had collapsed at Lucian's door. The midwife who came was the same one who had confirmed the pregnancy, a practical woman who had delivered more babies than she could count and was fazed by very little. Still, even she admitted this was unique. The labor was long and difficult. Orc babies were larger than human ones, and there were complications that had Lucian pacing outside the bedroom door, terrified and useless. Marcus and Thomas huddled together in the kitchen, too scared to be anywhere else, jumping at every sound from the bedroom. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a baby's cry split the air, strong and healthy and loud. Lucian burst through the door to find the midwife cleaning a squalling infant while Garla lay exhausted but smiling on the bed. "You have a daughter," the midwife announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket and placing her in Garla's arms. "She has healthy, strong lungs, all fingers and toes accounted for." Lucian moved to the bedside, staring down at the tiny face. His daughter was beautiful in the way all newborns were, but also unique. Her skin was a soft, pale green, lighter than Garla's but definitely not human. She had a dusting of dark hair, and when she opened her eyes to wail at the indignity of being born, they were a striking blue-green that seemed to mix both parents. "She is perfect," he breathed, touching one tiny fist. "She is ours," Garla said, and the joy in her voice was something Lucian knew he would remember forever. They named her Sarah, after Lucian's first wife, because Garla insisted that the woman who had given him the boys and taught him how to love deserved to be honored. It was a gift that Lucian had not expected, and it made him love Garla even more. Marcus and Thomas were besotted with their new sister, taking turns holding her carefully and marveling at how small she was. The house filled with the sounds of an infant crying and cooing, and the general chaos of a newborn, and Lucian discovered that his heart had room to expand yet again. Little Sarah was indeed a bridge between two worlds. As she grew from infant to toddler, her features became more defined. She had her mother's green skin, though lighter and small tusks that would become more prominent as she aged. But her facial structure was more human, and her eyes held a warmth that could have come from either parent. She was strong like an orc but curious like a human, and she charmed nearly everyone she met. Not everyone, of course. There were still those who looked at her with disgust or fear, who saw only the orc in her and judged her accordingly. But there were more who saw a child, bright and innocent, and could not hold their prejudice against her. Sarah was 2 years old, toddling around the farm and getting into everything with the fearless determination of the very young, when a delegation of orcs arrived at the farm. Lucian saw them coming from a distance, 4 orcs on foot, moving with the purposeful stride of people on a mission. He felt his stomach clench with worry. Garla had no contact with her old clan, and the arrival of orcs rarely meant anything good. "Garla," he called, and she emerged from the garden, brushing dirt from her hands. When she saw the approaching group, her whole body went tense. "I know them," she said quietly. "2 are from my old clan, the other 2 I do not recognize." They waited as the group approached, and Lucian positioned himself slightly in front of Garla, an instinctive protective gesture. The orcs stopped a respectful distance away, and one of them, a male with graying hair and scars marking his face, stepped forward. "Garla, daughter of Krurg," he said in the orcish language, which Lucian had learned enough of over the past 2 years to follow. "I am Thrak, elder of your old clan." "I remember you," Garla replied, her voice neutral. "You were one of those who cast me out." "I was. And I have come to say that we were wrong." Thrak's words were formal, careful. "The raid I endorsed, the one you spoke against, went forward after you left. It failed. Many of our warriors died, and the humans retaliated by destroying 2 of our settlements. The elder who ordered it is dead, killed in the fighting, and I have taken leadership of what remains of the clan." Garla said nothing, waiting. "We are a broken people now, Garla, scattered and weak, and in our weakness we have learned that you were right. Violence begets violence. Hatred only destroys." Thrak paused. "I have come to ask you to return to help us rebuild. We need your wisdom, your voice. We need the courage you showed to speak against foolishness." "No," Garla said flatly. Thrak blinked, clearly not expecting such an immediate refusal. "You do not even wish to discuss." "No," she repeated. "You cast me out for showing compassion. You called me a coward and a traitor for refusing to participate in the murder of innocents. And now that your choices have led to disaster, you come to me for help." She shook her head. "I have a home here, a family. I am not leaving." "We are your people, Garla. These are my people," she interrupted, gesturing to Lucian, to the boys who had emerged from the house, to little Sarah peering from behind her brother's legs. "This is my clan now. Human, orc, and everything between. You made your choice 2 years ago, and I have made mine." One of the other orcs, a younger female, spoke up. "But you are wasted here, living among humans who hate you. You could be a leader among your own kind. My husband does not hate me. My children do not hate me. And my own kind cast me out and told me I was worthless." Garla's voice was hard as stone. "I stayed where I was valued, and I built a life that has meaning. I will not abandon it." Thrak looked at Lucian for the first time, really looked at him. "You are the human she lives with." "I am the human she married," Lucian corrected, moving to stand fully beside Garla, taking her hand. "And she is not leaving. This is her home." "You married her." One of the other orcs sounded shocked. "But that is against custom, yes," Thrak said slowly. His eyes moved over the small family, assembled on the porch, the human man and orc woman standing together, the 2 human boys, and the green-skinned toddler. "You have children." 3 sons and a daughter," Garla said, and there was pride in her voice. "Marcus and Thomas are my stepsons, but they are mine. Sarah is my blood daughter, born of both worlds. Thrax stared at Sarah with an expression that Lucian could not quite read. Then, slowly, the old orc smiled. A child of both worlds. Perhaps that is what we need, bridges instead of walls. He looked back at Garla. I will not press you to return, but I would ask permission to visit occasionally, to see how you build this bridge you have made. We have much to learn about living in peace with humans, and you seem to have found a way. Garla glanced at Lucian, who nodded. You may visit, she said slowly, but not as a delegation or a clan, as individuals seeking knowledge, and you will respect my family and my home. Agreed, Thrax said. He sketched a formal bow, which the others echoed. We thank you for hearing us, Garla, daughter of Krurg. May your path be strong. May yours find wisdom, she returned, the traditional farewell. The orcs departed, and Lucian let out a breath he had not known he was holding. That was unexpected. Yes, Garla agreed. She looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. Do you think I made the right choice? They are my people, and they are suffering. You made the right choice for you and for us, Lucian said firmly. You cannot save people who are not ready to be saved, Garla, but maybe in time your example will teach them something. She nodded slowly, then smiled. Besides, I have too much work here to go running off to play clan elder. The south field needs planting, Sarah needs watching every moment or she will eat something she should not, and Thomas wants to learn how to make cheese. Practical as always, Lucian said, grinning. One of us has to be, she returned and kissed him. The years that followed were good ones, the kind that felt almost miraculous given how they had started. The farm prospered under the combined effort of Lucian and Garla, becoming known throughout the region for its productivity. Marcus grew into a thoughtful young man with a talent for breeding livestock, while Thomas discovered a love for carpentry and began making furniture that people traveled miles to commission. Sarah grew as well, becoming a bright, fierce child who inherited her mother's strength and her father's kindness. She faced prejudice. Of course, there were always those who saw her green skin and could not look past it. But she also found acceptance, particularly among the younger generation who had grown up seeing her parents' marriage and saw nothing strange in a child who looked like both human and orc. More mixed families began to appear in the region, slowly at first, but with increasing frequency. Orcs and humans who had found love despite the prejudice, who were willing to face the consequences for the sake of that love. Lucian and Garla's farm became a sort of informal gathering place for these families, a place where they knew they would be accepted and understood. Garla's old clan did visit, occasionally, and each time they seemed a little less hostile, a little more curious. Thrax became something like a friend, sitting on the porch with Lucian and discussing the challenges of building peace between peoples who had been at war for generations. It is the children who will change things, Thrax said during one visit, watching Sarah play with a young orc boy who had come with his family to learn about the mixed community. They do not carry the old hatreds. To them, someone like Sarah is just another child. We can hope, Lucian agreed. But we cannot assume. Each generation has to choose peace for themselves. Wise words, Thrax said and smiled. Garla chose well when she chose you. I chose well when she collapsed at my door and I decided to help her, Lucian corrected. Best decision I ever made. It was true. When Lucian looked back at his life, he could divide it clearly into before and after before Garla, when he had been surviving but not truly living, and after, when every day held purpose and joy. She had brought so much to his life, to his sons' lives, and to the community that had slowly learned to accept them. On the 5-year anniversary of their marriage, Lucian took Garla back to the place where it had all started, the clearing behind the farmhouse where she had staggered, bleeding and exhausted, having just saved his sons from wolves. It was a warm summer evening, and the sun was setting in shades of gold and crimson. "Why here?" Garla asked, though she smiled as she said it. "Because this is where it started, where you came into our lives and changed everything." He took her hands, marveling as he always did at the feel of her strong and capable in his. "I never thanked you properly, you know, for saving Marcus and Thomas, for staying, for building this life with me." "You thank me every day," she said softly. "With the way you look at me, the way you care for our children, the way you stand beside me, I need no other thanks than that. Still, I want to say it. Thank you, Garla. Thank you for being brave enough to save 2 human children. Thank you for being brave enough to stay when I asked. Thank you for loving me despite all the reasons you probably should not." "There are no reasons I should not love you," she corrected. "You are kind, honorable, strong when strength is needed, and gentle when it is not. You are a good father, a good husband, a good man. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." He kissed her then, there in the clearing where it had all begun, and it felt like coming home. When they broke apart, both smiling, the last light of day was fading and stars were beginning to appear. "We should head back," Garla said. "Sarah will be running Marcus ragged, and Thomas will need help with the project he is building." "Our family," Lucian said, satisfaction warm in his voice. "Our family," she agreed. They walked back to the farmhouse hand in hand, and as they approached, they could see the glow of lamplight in the windows, hear the sound of children's laughter. Home, in every sense of the word. Lucian thought about that moment often in the years that followed the moment he had looked up from his well and seen an orc woman staggering toward him, bloodied and desperate, clutching his son's toy. He could have turned her away, could have refused to help, could have let fear and prejudice rule him, but he had made a different choice, had let compassion and gratitude guide him instead. And that choice had given him everything: love, family, purpose, joy. It had changed not just his life but the lives of his sons, his community, and in some small way the world itself. All because an orc woman fought off 3 wolves to save his sons, then collapsed at his kitchen door, and he had the wisdom to let her in. The frontier continued to change around them as years passed into a decade. More mixed families appeared, more orcs and humans willing to bridge the gap between their peoples. It was not easy, and there were still those who fought against it, but the tide had turned. The younger generation, raised seeing families like the Zimmermans, found the old prejudices harder to maintain. Sarah grew into a remarkable young woman, tall and strong with her mother's warrior spirit and her father's compassionate heart. She became a healer, using techniques from both human and orc traditions, and her unique perspective made her invaluable to the community. Marcus married a human girl from a neighboring farm and gave Lucian and Garla their first grandchildren, beautiful babies who called Garla grandmother without hesitation. Thomas opened a carpentry business in town and became known throughout the region for his craftsmanship. Lucian watched his family grow and flourish, and he knew that none of it would have happened if not for that fateful day when Garla had stumbled into their lives. She was the foundation upon which everything else had been built, the bridge that had allowed 2 worlds to meet and create something new and wonderful. As he grew older, his hair going gray and his hands developing the ache of age, he would sometimes stand in that clearing behind the farmhouse and remember the blood on her hands, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she had said, "Your sons are safe," with such relief. Remember making the choice to help her, to let her stay, to love her. It had been the greatest gift of his life, that choice, and he had never regretted it, not for a single moment. Garla aged more slowly than him. Orcs lived longer than humans, and he knew there would come a day when he would leave her behind. The thought pained him, but she would not be alone. She would have their children and grandchildren, a community that loved her, a legacy of peace that they had built together. "What are you thinking about?" Garla asked, coming up beside him in the clearing one evening. They were both older now, her in her middle years and him approaching his 7th decade, but they still came here sometimes, to remember and to be grateful. "I am thinking that I have been blessed beyond measure," Lucian said, putting his arm around her. "I am thinking that I would not change a single moment of our lives together. Not even the hard parts, the fire, the hostility, the fear, not even those. They were part of the journey, part of what made us who we are." He kissed her temple. "I love you, Garla. I have loved you since the moment you collapsed at my door, though I did not know it then." "I love you," she returned, leaning into him. "My brave, foolish, wonderful human." They stood together as the stars came out, two people who had bridged worlds and built a life that neither could have imagined. Behind them, the farmhouse glowed with light and life. Children and grandchildren gathered for the evening meal, laughter and conversation spilling out into the night. It was everything Lucian had ever wanted, and more than he had ever dreamed possible. All because he had chosen kindness over fear, love over prejudice, hope over despair. The orc woman who had fought off 3 wolves to save his sons had become his whole world, and he would be grateful for that gift until his last breath. And in the twilight of his years,